Okay, I'd like to open, this is a public hearing on some resolutions for bonds. Requires a quorum of the Board of Aldermen. We'll be taking the agenda in a minute. If the clerk would like to take the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Alderman Wilshire. Here. Alderman Gidge, absent. Alderman Gathright is here. Alderman Laws, absent. Alderman Lopez.
Here.
Alderman Karen.
Here.
Alderman Kelly, absent. Alderman Jettie.
Here.
We also have at a PAC meeting, Alderman Melizzi Goja, Alderman Tenza.
Present.
Alderman Schmidt.
Here.
Alderman McCarthy is also at attendance at the PAC meeting. Michael O'Brien is present, and our chair, Mr. Alderman Dowd.
Present. Okay, so,
We have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
thank you. So, we have several bonds for public hearing. And the way this is going to proceed is going to take each one of the bonding resolutions one at a time. When we call the resolution, I'd like whoever's here representing the department involved to come up, sit in the circle, and briefly explain what the bond is for. Then I will open up for comments in favor of the resolution. Then I will take testimony in opposition. Again, I will take testimony in favor. And then again in opposition. I will then not close the public hearing, but I will close that particular resolution. And then we will go to the next resolution, go through all of the bonding resolutions the same way, and then we will close the public hearing and move on to the meeting of the Budget Committee. Okay, when the person from the particular department comes up, again, brief overview of what the bond is for. I'd like you to remain seating here, and if the Board of Aldermen have any questions concerning the bond, they can ask it at that time. So that's how we'll proceed. So let's see. Taking a chance. So the first resolution is R18077. It's authorizing the mayor and the city treasurer to issue bonds not to exceed the amount of $380,000 for various school improvements. Somebody here that wants to come up and explain what that's going to cover? Please introduce yourselves for the person taking the minutes.
Good evening. I'm Sean Smith. I'm the Plant Operations Director for the school district. And with me is Mr. Dan Dunman, who is the Chief Operating Officer for the school district.
Okay.
And I'll keep this brief and anticipate some questions. So we're looking for $380,000 of bonds. If you remember through the budget process this past year, we asked for $600,000. We ended up getting $100,000. I still have to rework this year's guesstimate of the deferred maintenance backlog. It's somewhere between $6 and $8 million. And at the rate of $100,000 a year, that takes 60 to 80 years. Kind of tough to catch up at that rate. Took a look at the remaining work we had scheduled for this year, and that was the genesis of this particular request. So the first item is to resurface the Emmer Street playground. It was for $90,000. That is to That's for the playground on the very front of the school. So as you go past it on Emmer Street and look towards the building, the 1892 original building, that's the playground, asphalt surface directly in front. It is the surface of it itself is very undulating. There are a lot of tripping hazards, a lot of alligator cracks in the asphalt itself, and it's at the end of its useful life. I do anticipate we will take it down probably to bare surface, or regrade it, bring in fresh soils and compact it properly and start from scratch. If we do it, that will definitely last 20 years. The next item is actually a combination of 3 roof replacement projects. Those are Bicentennial Elementary School, Ledge Street Elementary, and Emmer Street Elementary. Since I just left Emmer Street, I'll start up with that one first. So that's, again, the 1892 building, the original building. It's a shingled roof. Way back when, that used to be tiled, but now it's shingled. We are actively having leaks from that roof, and the shingles are well beyond their useful life. Bicentennial and Ledge Street, I'll kind of talk about both of them at the same time. Those are flat roofs. The Bicentennial Elementary School, and both of them are also EPDM, which is a rubber type material. The active leaks in both places. The Bicentennial is in the vicinity of the kitchen, and the Ledge Street is in the vicinity of the kitchen and the boiler room, which is right next to it. Those roofs all total $125,000. Our useful life is at least 20 years. I always, when I do roofing projects, I ask for 20-year warranties on the membrane at least. The third project is for emergency generator replacements at Centennial and Dr. Crisp. Those 2 schools were last renovated in the mid-90s. The generators are at least that old. They both are run by oil. Everywhere else in the school district, we've already converted everything to natural gas. The tank at Dr. Crisp is actually underground. So not knowing what that cost was of potentially of having to over-excavate for soils that might be contaminated, I added a little extra money to that one. Otherwise, they're just replacing both generators and getting rid of the oil tanks. So those 3 were already in our plan for this year. The last item is kind of an emergency item for us. It didn't pop onto our radar until a month or 2 ago. And it seems like the 2 high schools are brand new to me. I was here when they were both constructed, and it just seems like everything's just brand new. Why should everything break? But the motor for the chillers, both schools have complete air conditioning. They each have 2 chillers. They have a larger chiller unit and a smaller chiller unit. I believe, did they all receive the photographs I sent through Alderman Dowd? I don't.
We have them. I'm not sure if they went out there.
Okay. So this particular motor is a very large one. It's 450 horsepower, so it's big.
2,700 pounds.
And yeah, very, very, very hefty. They're expected to last 30 years. Obviously this one lasted from 2002 to present, so that was 16 years. We inquired as to why it was failing, basically near half of its regular service life, and they really didn't have an answer, except that nationwide they have a handful of these that fail, prematurely like this. And I really don't have any information on why. It happened. Needless to say, we kind of limped along the last half of the summer on the small chiller unit at the North High School. Luckily, we had all the summer school classes at the South High School this year, so that helped us out quite a bit. But this is something we'd have to have in place before next summer begins. So we can't wait for next fiscal year at this point. So we've already got some pretty hard numbers on that one, and it's $80,000. So again, all 4 of these projects are expected to last 20 years. They total $380,000, and I'm ready for any questions if you have any.
Okay, I think what I'll do, is open it up for public comment first, and then have the questions from the board members in case somebody brings something up that they want to address. So I'll now take testimony in favor of R 18077. Is there anyone that would like to come up and testify in favor? Seeing no one, is there anyone who'd like to testify in opposition to 077? Seeing no one, once again, is there anyone who would like to testify in favor of R 077? And once again, is there anybody that would like to speak in opposition? Seeing none, are there any questions that any of the board members have? Alderman Wilshire had the first question.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Do you have any plans on replacing the fence around that playground at Emmer Street School, the chain link fence that's in pretty rough shape?
It's not on our immediate plans. We actually replaced a portion of it closest to the ball field. So if you're going west on Emmer Street, you'd see that section. Admittedly, there's a lot more that needs to be replaced. We did put a guardrail along the front of it because I don't know if you recall, this past year some driver went through the fence and into the playground. So that's why we put the guardrail. But I'll certainly take another look at it and put it on our list.
Thank you.
Alderman Lopez?
So the two roofs that you were going to be replacing, well, you mentioned three of them. One was Amherst. I think the other two were Dr. Crisp and Bicentennial. And you said they'd be flat rubber roofs as they are now?
Those were Bicentennial and Ledge Street.
Bicentennial and Ledge? Okay.
Rubber roofs, correct.
I'm just curious because it came up with when we were talking about fire station roofs. Will those be compatible with solar panels if at some point the city decided to add solar to it?
They would be. Typically, you put solar panels on when the roofs are fairly fresh and new. Certainly, those are flat roofs. More the issue of the type of membrane is the strength of the roof underneath it. So you have a good idea of the roof structure. I believe most of our schools can take solar. We are looking at that.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman O'Brien?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Smith, disappointed with the life expectancy on these chillers that you have brought up. And when it was originally built, is there any warranty that went with that type of material? And is the city seeking it? Then the second part of the question, if I may double load on, is when we get the new one to replace it, if it's passed this evening, will we have those guarantees in place just to make sure that it's efficient,
So the answer to the first one was yes, there was a warranty, long expired. I want to say it was 5 years for the motor itself. And then whichever new motor we get will have the same warranty.
Okay.
Any other questions? Alderman Jettie?
So are these projects, is this part of the budget? I mean, was this anticipated? Are we just reviewing this as far as issuing bonds, and it was already part of the plan that was part of the budget that you presented to us before?
Yes, so the first three projects on my list were part of the deferred maintenance request for this current fiscal year. The last one, again, was kind of an emergency, came up at the last minute.
Yeah, all of the resolutions we're taking tonight, we had a meeting with the mayor and finance to ensure that they're all part of the initial plan. We're not adding anything to the budget that wasn't already planned for, except for the emergency motor.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, I will close the public hearing on R 18077, open the public hearing on R 18078. Thank you. Yeah, you can go. R 18078 is authorizing the mayor and the city treasurer to issue bonds not to exceed the amount of $1,300,000 for Public Health and Community Services Division building renovations. Is there someone here to present that? Treasurer Fedette.
Chairman, I believe you all got a letter from Tim Cummins. Tim is upstairs in another meeting.
Yes.
He said if you really need him, I could text him, he'll come down, but I think if you see the letter, I mean, I think a lot of you are familiar with the building. It's been around for about 80 years plus. It's, needs a lot of help. And, back in 2008, I believe, the city approved a bond for that of 1.2 million, but it was determined shortly after that that wasn't enough to do that building. So this would be an addition to that original one that was approved in 2008. And I think Tim explains in the letter what's, you know, the type of work that's going to be done, elevator. As you know, the building is not handicap accessible in any really good shape for that. And they need a new roof, doors, windows, mechanical and plumbing, the whole works. So the two bonds together should be sufficient to do the building in a decent fashion.
Okay. I'll now ask for any testimony in favor of R 18078. Seeing none, I'll now ask for testimony in opposition to R 18078. Seeing none, I will then again ask for testimony in favor of R 18078. Seeing none, I will now ask again for testimony in opposition of R 18078. Seeing none, questions from the board relative to this bond? Alderman O'Brien?
Yes, Mr. Fedad, you did a fair job in really explaining it, but this building, just to brief the others and those that haven't, from the public have been in it, satisfies the needs of a community that needs the public health assistance. Yet people who are in wheelchairs, you know, depends upon the lift, is in extremely bad repair, everything else, old systems. We didn't really take care of it. I did have the fire next door, and some people said I probably should have let it burn, and I'm glad we didn't. The fire department doesn't do that. But I'm glad this is before us this evening, because this is a very important structure within the city that satisfies the public health needs of the public that really can't afford traditional type of assistance. So thank you.
Any other questions on R 078? Seeing Alderman Tenza? Jettie.
Jettie.
Sorry.
So this is not going to increase the size of the building at all? It's just going to renovate what's there?
I believe it's strictly renovation of the current building. I mean, they'll renovate it in a way that it becomes more efficient in use. I mean, it was a high school, as you know, I believe.
Right, I remember when it was a high
Catholic
school.
Girl High School for St. Louis, so it's never been designed properly for an office or laboratories or anything. So I think that part of the work will be to restructure the whole inside to make it more efficient.
I'm not sure about the elevator. There may be some additional, but not another room addition.
So the elevator may be.
May
on the
protrude outside
exterior
a
of the
bit.
Current building. I've been in the building, I know that it's, to put it mildly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Expression, but I can't say it here.
Okay, any,
Alderman Lopez.
Alderman Lopez?
I just wanted to comment, my first time as alderman attending a Board of Health meeting, I managed to trip up the stairs because they were slippery and not designed. I can't even imagine what people with handicaps, mobility issues go through.
Alderman Karen?
Thank you. Having worked in that building for 10 years, it really needs some renovation. So my question is, because of the type of work that's going to be done, is this going to interfere with the day-to-day operations? Or are they going to try to do some of this work at night and weekends? You can't answer that.
Can't answer that.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think that's something to think about, because you're talking roofs, you're talking inside elevators, et cetera, et cetera.
We didn't have a conversation on that, but I would imagine that they will try to do it on a not to interfere basis.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Lopez?
I think Alderwoman Gathright might remember, but I'm pretty sure they mentioned at the Board of Health Commissioners meeting that there would be an impact on the lab services when they're doing that room because there's nowhere else for them to be.
Mhm. Alderman Gotthrey?
To be honest with you, I had a concern because, from what I understand, they're doing a lot of duct work and all that type of stuff, and they're gonna have petitions. And I'm just curious as to how they're gonna be able to stay in the building, to be honest.
Well,
It
we,
might, I think that's the plan,
Yeah.
for them to stay in the building. I just don't really see it.
well, we did 5 elementary schools and 1 high school by, and the kids were in the school. We were able, the contractors were able to work around them safely. So I imagine the same would be true here.
I
Any-
hope so.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing on R 18-078 and move on to Resolution R 18-079, authorizing the mayor and the city treasurer to issue bonds not to exceed the amount of $5 million for the fiscal year 2019 sewer infrastructure program. Come up, take a seat, introduce yourself. And I'm sure that this was in the plan because the mayor and I went over that, so.
Good evening, Board. Steve Dukran, City Engineer. Let me discuss the need for this funding. We have about 315 miles of sanitary sewer in our network, and many miles, about 40 miles, predate 1930s. Some of them even going back to the late 1800s. They're made up primarily of unreinforced concrete, clay tile, asbestos cement in that era. And those materials have reached their end of service life and show up in the forms of failed sewers, sinkholes, and we have to react to those. We have usually an emergency response to take care of sinkholes to make the streets safe. So we've had a program, a year-to-year program, consistently around mid-2000, 2005, 2006, replacing a certain number of feet, linear feet, every year. That funding hasn't been adequate. We've been doing $1 million and a half, and we went up to about just over $2 million in the last couple of years. Still, with rising costs, we still haven't been able to keep up with even dealing with those that have sinkholes, far less looking at those that are under the ground and are failing. So we do 2 types of replacements. We do, or 2 types of rehab. We replace when we need to, but we are trying to focus on what we call in situ rehab, which is lining the pipe. And so you don't have to tear up the road to do so. Obviously, tearing up the road does cost a lot more. Concurrently, we are doing another program. You must have seen it here. We call it CMOM, C-M-O-M. It's an acronym. And that will involve looking at these sewers using closed-circuit TV and other methods to identify the bad pipes and then come up with a comprehensive plan to do using criticality for a better approach to dealing with what we don't know. So this request for $5 million now is to really address better the need to rehab our bad pipes. And hopefully, when we come with the CMOM results, we will have a better funding situation where we can phase more projects in. Essentially, that's what this is about.
Thank you. So, as in keeping with the other resolutions, I'll now take testimony in favor of R 18-079. Seeing none, I'll now take testimony in opposition, R 18-079. Again, I will take testimony in favor of R 18-079. And again, I will take testimony in opposition of R 18-079. Questions from the board? Alderman Tenza.
Can I just ask, will this, the new plan, will it help address the issues with the wastewater runoff and some of the sewage pipes, or is that a completely separate issue and altogether?
So I think your question refers to the combined sewer system.
Yes.
No, this program is primarily to deal with bad pipes, failing pipes, pipes that have gone beyond their useful life. The CSO program is a separate program. And we have other efforts. And the CSO program actually is through a permit given by the EPA and the New Hampshire DES, and dealing with the overflows into the rivers and streams. And so we're dealing with that separately. The issue there is looking at capacity of the system, but this is more of an infrastructure problem.
Just to follow up. Mr.
Follow up?
And so when we're replacing pipes now, we're just replacing failing pipes or sections of failing pipes. We're not able to then go in and address this concern.
That's
the same
correct. The EPA would like to see us separate these combined sewers where we can capture the stormwater runoff, and that's essentially in the inner city, and put that in a separate storm drain, which now you can direct to the rivers. That comes with consequences. You have to deal with the stormwater. How do you discharge it? How do you clean it before you put it in the river? Stormwater itself has, a lot of pollutants and contaminants that you will have to remove. So we continue to, I wouldn't say negotiate, but discuss with the EPA what's some of the best methods, better methods that are affordable to deal with this combined sewer overflow issues.
Thank you.
Alderman Lopez.
Can't understand the reasoning here. We have to explain to the EPA why it's a bad idea to wash our streets into the river?
I think that's a
Whose
good,
team are they on?
that's a good way of putting it. What we have realized is that the EPA, there are two branches that we deal with, one for stormwater and then one for combined sewer overflows. And it appears that they don't talk to each other much.
Okay. Thanks for enlightening me. I think.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I will now close the public hearing on R 18079. Open the public hearing on R 18080. Authorizing the mayor and the city treasurer to issue bonds not to exceed the amount of $600,000 for various improvements at the Solid Waste Department 4 Hills Landfill.
Superintendent Jeff LaFleur. This bond is for two projects. It's for my soil wall. They're both permit driven, so the soil wall and my gas expansions. The soil wall separates our trash from our residents at our 500-foot setback. And the landfill gas expansion collects all the methane from within the landfill to help reduce odors.
Okay. So now I will take testimony in favor of R 18080. Seeing none, I'll take testimony in opposition to R 18080. Seeing none, I'll take testimony in favor of R 18080 and testimony in opposition. Seeing none. Any questions from the board? Alderman Jettie.
The landfill gas system, as I understand it, the landfill, the stuff, the trash, the rubbish that's in the landfill produces methane gas. And that this gas system captures that methane gas. And what happens to the methane gas after you capture it?
We sell it to our partner, PPE, at the landfill, and they generate electricity with it.
Okay, and so we sell it, so we get money for this gas?
After we reach a certain threshold that was negotiated with the city and them, after we reach a certain threshold, we get a certain percentage of money.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Alderman Lopez.
Just regarding the methane collection, have you been following any of the tannery discussions?
Very little.
Okay. I wasn't, my question is basically, do you think there's anything worth capturing there, or?
At the tannery?
Yeah.
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
Alderman Wilshire.
Well, thank you for, remediating the odor. That's all I have. Thank you.
It's the dirt pile and the handkerchief that we're paying for here.
Okay, thank you. So now I will close the public hearing on our 18079 and open I'm sorry, 080, and open the public hearing on R 18081, authorizing the mayor and the city treasurer to issue bonds not to exceed the amount of $660,000 to purchase a new pumper truck for the fire department. Good evening, chief.
Good evening. I'm Brian Rhodes, Chief of National Fire Rescue. Thank you for this opportunity to speak before you this evening. This request is to replace the pumper truck that is stationed at the Conant Road Fire Station. This request keeps in line with a replacement schedule that was put in place many years before me by some very wise people in this horseshoe and in fire administration to make sure that we have mission-ready, mission-capable equipment at all times in the city. Yes, we will be replacing the fire pumper at the Conant Road Station, but we should all know that that vehicle is available citywide at any time, and we will not be disposing of that vehicle. We keep that vehicle in reserve status, so to speak, so that when vehicles go out for preventive maintenance or breakdown, we always have our complement of 6 fire pumpers and 3 ladder trucks in the city available at all times.
Thank you. Okay, I will now take testimony in favor of R 18081. Seeing none, I will now take testimony in opposition to R 18081. Seeing none, I will then again take testimony in favor of R 18081. Seeing none, again, I will take testimony in opposition to R 18081. Seeing none, does anyone on the board have questions of the chief? Alderman Lopez.
So if we're replacing a pumper truck and then putting the pumper truck into the reserve fleet, is the old pumper truck replacing an even older pumper truck?
Yes, thank you, Alderman. We'll be replacing a 2001 pumper truck that is currently in reserve status, and we'll trade that in, so we will achieve some financial benefit.
All right, well, that was my question, so, so we get a discount. I'll take it.
Any other questions? Alderman Karen.
Sure, thank you. Once you put this order in, what's the lead time?
Unfortunately, I think all the manufacturers in the United States now are about a year out, so.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Alderman Tenzo.
And you may have answered it previously, but the life expectancy of one of these vehicles, you expect that it'll be here in active use in the city for about 15 years or more or less?
Yes, thank you again for that question, Alderman. 15 years is what we shoot for. Unfortunately, I have no control over the activity level of these vehicles, and we are on a trajectory this year to surpass the 15,000 emergency response total for the year. We have an awesome mechanical division that keeps these vehicles in tip-top shape. So we're very hopeful of that. That's the plan. Yes.
Thank you.
We, like other major cities, contribute to support other departments when they're in need, and like we sent some trucks down to the gas issue they had in Massachusetts, so that's a lot longer wear and tear on trucks than you normally anticipate, but when we need help, as we've seen in the past, they're here to help us. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you. to help out my fellow Alderman Tenza, Chief, would you agree with me? It's basically, it's mileage too, and most people, when we look at a vehicle, traditionally our cars, we look at the mileage and consider that a lot of use. But when we're talking about fire trucks such as pumper trucks or ladder trucks, it's engine hours when we're really talking about this. Because even though they may drive a mile to the fire, I would assume if you're pumping at a fire for 4 hours at a high revolution, that's taking the wear and tear of both the engine machinery and the pump itself. So it cuts down the life expectancy dramatically, I would imagine.
Thank you, Alderman. Yes, you are correct. I am not a mechanical expert in this, but I have been told that it equates to somewhere around 3 times the road mileage in motor hours. So we typically, by the time we dispose of, Alderman, by the time we finally trade one in, we're well over 100,000 miles. So the hours on that motor are pretty extensive.
Should we like put it in neutral during the parade and just let it go first? That's kinda helpful.
That'd be Alderman.
Any other questions? Thank you, Chief.
Thank
I'll
you.
now close the public hearing on R 18081. Open the public hearing on R 18085, authorizing the mayor and the city treasurer to issue bonds not to exceed the amount of $650,000 for the purchase of 2 automated refuse trucks.
Superintendent Jeff LaFleur, Solid Waste Department. A lot of the conversation helps out with my purchase here. From the last one, I'm on a 7-year rotation with my trash trucks because they idle at high volumes all day long, sometimes 6 days a week. The 2 trucks on here, one will be the front load truck, which will also give us a backup, so we won't be trading that one in. I'll keep that as a spare in the back. That truck actually services all the schools, all the city buildings, and when that truck goes down, everyone's on hold. So now I'll have a backup truck so I can get to those. The other truck will be a semi-automated truck replacing an older vehicle. I'm actually gonna let the Parks Department borrow that truck to do their parks. Their Packer let go this year, so we're gonna use it within the division.
Okay. I will now take testimony in favor of R 18085. Seeing none, I will take testimony in opposition to R 18085. Seeing none, I will take testimony again in favor of R 18085. Seeing none, I will once again take testimony in opposition to R 18085. Seeing none, does anyone on the board have a question for the superintendent? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. That will close the public hearing. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Alderman Wiltshire. Motion to adjourn. We're adjourned at 7:39. All right. And now we will open the regular budget meeting of October 22nd, 2018. It's 7:40 PM in the Aldermanic Chamber. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alderman at Large Wilshire.
Here.
Alderman at Large Brian McCarthy's at a PAC meeting. Alderman at Large Michael O'Brien is present. Alderman at Large Shoshana Kelly is absent. Alderman at Large Dave Tenza. Present. Alderman Jan Schmidt.
Here.
And Chairman Richard A. Dowd.
Present. Okay. So the first order of business for the,
Excuse me. Also in attendance, excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
yes.
Will be Alderman Gathright.
yes. Okay, so the first item on the agenda is public comment. Is there anyone that would like to present public comment for anything on the agenda for the budget? Seeing none. Communications?
From Tim Cummings, Director of Economic Development, the reasons R 18078, request for an additional $1.3 million for public health building renovation.
If there's no objection, I'd like to so suspend the rules to accept and place on file a communication from Director Cummings received after the agenda was prepared. Seeing no opposition, so ordered. Unfinished business,
There is none.
new business resolutions.
Before us this evening is R 18077, authorizing the mayor and the city treasurer to issue bonds not to exceed the amount of $380,000 for various school improvements. This was also assigned to the Board of Education with a favorable recommendation issued on 10/9/18.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to recommend to the full board final passage
Yes, Alderman O'Brien will make that recommendation, Mr. Chair.
of R 18077. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Alderman O'Brien?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before us this evening is R 18078, authorizing the mayor and the city treasurer to issue bonds not to exceed the amount of $1,300,000 for the Public Health and Community Service Division building renovations. This was also assigned to the Board of Health with a favorable recommendation issued 10/17/18. Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
Motion on the floor is to recommend to the full board final passage of R 18078. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Also before us this evening is R 18079, authorizing the mayor and city treasurer to issue bonds not to exceed the amount of $5 million for the fiscal year 2019 sewer infrastructure program. This was also assigned to the Board of Public Works, and it's going to appear on 10/25/18 agenda. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
Any questions from the board? Motion on the floor is to recommend final passage. Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Also before us is R 18080, authorizing the mayor and city treasurer to issue bonds not to exceed the amount of $600,000 for various improvements at the Solid Waste Department for Hills Landfill. This was also assigned to the Board of Public Works, and it is to appear on its 10/25/18 agenda. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a recommendation of final passage.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to recommend to the full board final passage of our 18080. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Also before us this evening is R 18081, authorizing the mayor and city treasurer to issue bonds not to exceed the amount of $600,000 to purchase a new pumper truck for the fire department. This was also assigned to the Board of Fire Commissioners with a favorable recommendation issued on 10/1/18. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
Okay, just for a correction, it's 660,000.
Did I say?
You said 600,000.
Oh, 660, yes, thank you. I don't want to, I want all the chrome, yes. Excuse my apologies, chief.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is to recommend final passage of R 18081. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Alderman
Okay.
O'Brien.
Thank you. Also before us this evening is R 18082, changing the purpose up to $165,000 for extended bond proceeds from the Spitbrook Road Fire Station 3 building renovations projects to the Lake Street Fire Station heating, ventilation, and air conditioning and hot water system replacement project. This was also assigned to the Board of Fire Commissioners with a favorable recommendation issued 10/1/18. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion for final passage.
Okay, just for the edification of the board members, this is a repurposing. It did not need a public hearing. So this wasn't in the public hearings that we just had. And are there any questions?
Chairman, I just have a question for you that maybe you could answer. The $165,000, was the city able to come in under budget on the bond? Why was there this excess from the original project?
That's the only time we have money left over, is when
Oh.
a project comes under.
Okay.
Treasurer Fredette? Is that true? That the excess that we're applying here is because they didn't spend all the money on the, on,
Yes.
thank
It
you.
doesn't happen too often, but it happens on this.
All the schools, we're always
Schools?
under.
Yes, the schools, yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, the motion on the floor is for final passage of our 18082. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Also before us is R 18084, approving the cost items of a collective bargaining agreement between the National Board of Education and the National Association of School Administrators and Supervisors, American Federation of School Administrators, AFL-CIO, from July 1st, 2017 through June 30th, 2019, and related transfers. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion for final passage.
Okay, Mr. Donovan, would you like to come up and? Okay, so this is a union contract, and explain what the union is and the number of people in it, and,
Okay, this is a, do you want to speak to that?
Sure.
Dave? Okay. Introduce yourself.
Dave Rossio, president of the association. It is a brand-new bargaining unit formed about 18 months ago. About 54 people in the unit, directors, supervisors of the school district. This contract was approved by the membership 28.
and also approved by the Board of Education.
It was.
Anything else to add at the moment, or?
I would just say that most what happened with this contract, they were previously part of the non-affiliated group. The non-affiliated group does not officially have a contract, but they did have a set of guidelines, a book. So basically, this contract took that, added things like grievances and a few other things that the non-affiliated manual would not have, and pretty much rolled over anything that was in there as far as benefits. There were a few changes, but for the most part, that was the rollover, and then there were negotiated raises for last year and for this year. So it's only a 2-year contract, and then they will meet again and negotiate later this year.
So in the legislation, there was a copy of the contract and the costing sheet, which I have right here. And I will make the assumption that everyone has had a chance to look at that, but if not, are there any questions that you would like to ask? Alderman Jettie.
I'm not on the committee, so maybe that's why I didn't get a copy of this. And I'm just,
No, but we get our agendas for all the meetings, all the aldermen get that, and it references the legislation. All the legislation is available online. That's the only way we get it, and the only way and I printed my own copy out, but.
okay. Well, thank you for telling me that. I was not aware of it, so, and my only question is, I didn't understand, who does this cover? Again, could you tell me again who?
Directors,
Directors, assistant directors, supervisors, technology folks, there's some folks in food service, pretty diverse group, actually.
So directors, what directors of what? Who are the directors?
Directors of transportation, director of special education, director of plant operations.
I see. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, there's a group of people with that level of employment The director is the title, but that's who it's covering. Any other questions? Okay, motion on the floor. So recommend final passage of our 18084. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Donovan. Thank you. Just for edification, I should have said it earlier, none of these are gonna be on the agenda for tomorrow's Board of Aldermen meeting. I'm not sure about this one, but I think most of them are 2 weeks from tomorrow. Yeah. Yeah, that's the only reason I wasn't sure about this one is normally bargaining units, when they submit the contract to us, we have 30 days, so. All right, Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Also, this evening before us is R 18085, authorizing the mayor and city treasurer to issue bonds not to exceed the amount of $650,000 for the purchase of 2 automated refuse trucks. This was also assigned to the Board of Public Works, and it is to appear on this 10/25/18 agenda. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a recommendation for final passage.
Okay, the motion is to recommend to the full board final passage of R 18085. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. New business ordinances,
There is none?
general discussion. Is there anyone that has anything they want to discuss? Alderman Jettie?
I would just like, for the record, to note my presence.
Oh, I did not, and I will. Believe me, you will be noted. Thank you,
Thank
Alderman
you.
Jettie.
Thank you.
Shortchanging your former department. Forget.
Well, I should have caught that, excuse me, Alderman Jettie, when you mentioned we're a member of the, the committee per se, but I should have noted it down. My apologies, sir.
There's no need for public comment since there's no one in the audience.
Follow up,
Yes,
I just
now it's
wanted-
remarks by Alderman, so.
I just wanted to say that I went and looked at the resolution, and I saw that attached to the resolution is the outline that you talked about, and
Yeah.
so it's, I did get it, and I'm sorry I didn't
Yeah,
catch it.
typically you'll find the old contract, which doesn't apply here. And then you'll find the new contract with all the red lines of things that change from the negotiating with the bargaining unit. So some of them were pretty thick, so you may want to read them online, or just focus on what changed. And we've probably mentioned this before, but when we approve bargaining units, we only get to address cost items. We don't get to address anything else that the bargaining unit bargained. So if it doesn't involve cost, it's not in our purview. Okay, any other remarks by Alderman? No? We don't need a non-public. Is there a motion? Alderman Wiltshire.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned at 7:54.